into Be Conscious. I'm Damien Barling. Berry Accius, the founder and CEO of Voice of the Youth and a leading activist in the city of Sacramento, is going to join me shortly. We're going to tell the story of how we met and what went on the 2 nights the Golden One Center was shut down. It's an incredible story that I've told pieces of on my sports radio show, The Lowdown, on Sports 1140 KHTK AM in Northern California. I've told pieces of it before, but you'll be able to hear it today from multiple perspectives, and we'll also get into what Berry does for our youth here in Northern California and what he tells them about interacting with police and what the world thinks of them in 2018. Before Berry joins us, I want to thank all of you who have subscribed to Be Conscious and have gotten us off to a really great start. The idea for this podcast actually was birthed shortly after the Stephon Clark shooting, which we're going to talk a lot about today, which, if you're unfamiliar, Stephon Clark was the latest in the rather common occurrence of unarmed black men being shot by law enforcement. And this one obviously hit closer to home as it happened here at home, here in Sacramento. And being able to get involved with Berry and various organizations around Sacramento, I knew that the time to start a conversation that wasn't related to sports was right now. So thank you again to all who have helped get this podcast started. And if you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It only takes 2 clicks and a couple of seconds. If you have a little more time on your hands, you can leave us a review also. I know I mention this stuff pretty frequently, but it does help us get noticed by iTunes and really helps this podcast grow across the iTunes network, the Google Play network, and the various podcast platforms that you might be using. So your support of the show has been tremendous, and we're just going to keep growing, and we're going to make this thing really special. So thank you. Stephon Clark was shot and killed by 2 Sacramento police officers back in March. The officers claimed they feared for their life despite no evidence Stephon was armed or was even a threat. Between the 2 officers, 20 shots were fired off, 8 struck Stephon, and depending on what autopsy you believe will determine where those shots landed. Dr. Bennett Amalu, who was hired by the Clark family, said Stephon was shot 8 times in the back or side. The county autopsy said he was shot just 3 times in the back. 2 autopsies, 2 medical professions, 2 results, and 2 agendas. The day after Stephon Clark was shot, actually, I take that back. It wasn't the day after Stephon Clark was shot. It was the day after Sacramento Police Chief Daniel Hahn made the body cam videos available to the public. The day after those videos were made public, I went on my radio show and pleaded for the Sacramento police force to be better. Pleaded for our elected officials to be better and see this for what it was. Poorly trained officers murdering a young man they had no reason to fear. Unfortunately, several months later, they weren't better, and we weren't better. Stephon Clark became just another name in an ever-growing list of snuff films starring law enforcement and black people. Whether it was Sacramento, or New York, or Baltimore, or Ferguson, there was now a visual display of police brutality that makes that of Rodney King look like a tame after-school special. To not understand the severity of this is to not understand the history of the African-American community in law enforcement. I mentioned Ferguson in 2014. I mentioned Los Angeles in 1992. You want to go back to Watts in 1965 or Detroit in 1967. All of those incidents started because of an interaction between law enforcement and a member, more often than not, a lower-income member of the black community. You want to go further back, check out Tulsa in 1921 or Harlem in 1935. To believe bias amongst law enforcement isn't a problem now is to believe that it never was. You can tie what you see from Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed in their anthems demonstrations directly to this. Colin Kaepernick said, "We got bodies in the streets and guys are getting paid leave." He was right 2 years ago when he said that, and he's still right today. I'm very happy to bring in Berry Accius, the founder and CEO of Voice of the Youth.
What's up, my brother?
Let's go back to the night Stephon Clark was killed.
Man.
How did you hear about that?
It was crazy. I was coming back home from my best friend's birthday in Oakland, and I just remember coming home and hearing sirens, helicopter, and I just was like, man, just another day in Sacramento, South area. Then I got information from that it was a young man that got shot, and it was some questionable antics to that. And that's kind of when me and the community got together, went on ground zero. I checked it out early in the morning as I was getting information from other people. And then next thing you know, hours later, we were in a full-on situation. I think the one thing that kind of threw me off was the simple fact that the response time for the police officers and kind of the information that they threw out to the people didn't seem right. So I was already suspicious when they came out with the first report, more or less saying, well, this person was doing something, that's why the police had to shoot him. You know what I mean? And it was like, he had this, he had that. And it was
that's
like,
not uncommon.
Well, I mean, but here's the thing about it. What folks have to understand as they listen to this, the narrative was supposed to change with a new police chief, a black police chief. Right. The accountability and the transparency was supposed to be there in the community. So when you hear a storyline like this, it kind of is the same kind of storyline as always happens when there's a police-involved shooting. You're like, yo, something is up. And that's kind of like that had my spider senses tingling right there when I heard the narrative. I'm like, whoa, they trying to change something up. And then we got information from so-and-so, and when you hear like from individuals on the ground that was there or who knew the young man, and what you know about media, and then of course I have different media contacts that was giving me some key information, and as a community, we got together and we figured out, man, there was some foul play. Total foul play.
So your first order of business is what?
Order of business is always to check on the family, check on the family, check on the community, and then start organizing with different community leaders and creating that safe space of healing for the folks to let them know that they are loved. This is an unfortunate tragedy. We always want to make space for them to be able to express how they feel at that moment, and then it's time to get busy. It's time to make these people uncomfortable. And understandingly, 2014, when Mike Brown was murdered, Sacramento officials used to tell us every time when we used to say, hey, we might need to check in of the pulse of Sacramento with our policing because everything ain't too, happy-go-lucky around here. And they used to tell us we're not Ferguson. And we fought and fought. And then 2016, here comes Joseph Mann. And there was other deaths beforehand. But 2016 is where we kind of went national. And we had said, and I remember saying to a city council with Kevin Johnson as our mayor at that time, saying, Sacramento is just one national moment away from being just like Ferguson. Right. And now you have the Stephon Clark case.
It was amazing. We talked to Wesley Lowry. It's in the archives if you want to go listen to it. We had a conversation with Wesley Lowry, who was on the ground in Ferguson. He wrote a book called They Can't Kill Us All. And
that's a powerful book.
We're not Ferguson was a line that wasn't just uttered by officials in Sacramento. Yeah. It was uttered by officials where Walter Scott was killed. It was uttered by officials where Alston Sterling was killed, where, Freddie Gray was killed, like whether it was Baltimore, New York, it was,
ironically, right?
Yeah, we're not Ferguson. We're not Ferguson. And Ferguson was really the launch. It's, it's amazing looking back.
The relaunch. Because we've been here before, remember?
Well, that's what I mean. What I was going to say is it's like the launch of the second civil rights movement.
Yes, sir.
And, you mentioned you get together with your crew, Barry, and you get together with leaders and you start to figure out, okay, we're going to organize. What do we have to do to get out there and make people uncomfortable? I want to go to March 5th now.
Yes, sir.
And you organize the protest. You organize the demonstration that made its way, through I-5.
Yes, sir.
Take me through that day, and ultimately what I want to get to is how you wound up at the Golden One Center that night.
The beautiful thing about this moment was folks on the ground who have done this work for a long period of time, we knew this moment was coming. Like we predicted it. We didn't know when, but we knew. Why? It's because Sacramento has not, as progressive as it wants to claim it is. It's very conservative. It's very much a good boy city, right? And it's very much stuck in its ways. So we knew the little things that they stretch, give us a black chief, right? Oh, yes, black chief, everything is going to change. We asked for more things than they gave us. So we looked at it like, okay, eventually something's going to end up popping, regardless of, because if you don't hold folks accountable, folks are going to continue to do whatever they feel because they feel that they're protected. So the beautiful part about it was we were ready for this moment. We were ready. So it wasn't about egos. It wasn't about this organization or that organization. It came so organically together as far as leadership on the ground. And I think the rage of the people in the community, especially our young people, because you got to remember, Stephon Clark was a very popular young man. Had it probably been another person that wasn't really known throughout the community in different areas and walks of life, I don't know if it would have been this much volume. You literally had other sides that were feuding with each other, right?
Yeah.
One side that was feuding with each other in a real intense battle, basically saying, guns down, I am not the enemy, you are not the enemy, these are the enemies, and coming together. So with that energy, it was easy for us to organize and say, yo, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And strategically, from the things that we've done since 2014, we just upped the ante, and we had larger numbers, of a consistent number. And I think that's kind of where we went to City Hall. Organically, the plan was to go ahead and take over the highway. But what happened after that, it was that young, youthful energy of rage. We're tired of oppression. We're tired of being looked upon as a threat. We're tired of being killed on these streets. We are human. That's when I feel that all of us decided on that day it doesn't matter what happens today, I'm going to die for the cause.
I remember when we first met up outside the Golden One Center, we're talking there for a few minutes, and you pointed out and said, see that dude over there in the such and such shirt? See that dude over there in the such and such shirts? They're rivals.
Yes.
But they're out here together. It's so reminiscent of, and this is really the scary part when you look ahead to what could be in store for the city of Sacramento is it's so reminiscent of 1992 in Los Angeles.
Most definitely.
Where you'd see the red rag tied to the blue rag,
yes, sir.
And the two are holding it up together.
Yes, sir.
Because they're out there fighting the same thing. You know, several decades later, we're still talking about the same thing. You know, before you got here, I was laying out how you can trace Ferguson. Obviously, it's worth pointing out, there's a documentary on Stars that just came out called Stranger Fruit.
I need to go check that one. I heard about it.
I watched it last night. It's incredible. And, you know, it lays the incidents of, you know, I had mentioned Ferguson. I also mentioned Los Angeles. I mentioned Watts and Detroit back in the 60s and how so many of these incidents can be traced back to interactions with law enforcement. So you start City Hall. You head out, you hit I-5, you come around, things are wrapping up, starting to die down, and then someone realizes there's a game going on at the Golden One Center.
Like, you could not have planned that organic moment. We literally shut down the streets. Things got more intense. There was definitely some confrontation with police officers, nothing physical, but there was moments where you thought this could really
tense.
It could go the other way. Then you circle around. We actually hit sauced, right? We gave the customers some entertainment, so to speak, unwarranted. And one of the things that was so profound when we were in sauced and just taking over that balcony area, I remember, I believe it was Stephon Clark's, it could have been his cousin, and how she was weeping and how she was just so emotional, right? And I hugged her, and she said thank you, and we just embraced for a while. And the energy from her made me pick up the volume where I had soldiers, and no one was directly saying do this. Everyone was kind of having that moment of letting it all out. You remember, this is the moment where folks who've been marginalized are saying enough is enough. This is my time, and I'm going to show you I'm angry. All of a sudden, we were like, wait a minute. we over here at Sauced, while some of the other team had gone over back to the city hall kind of to wrap it up, right? Because mind you, we're like 2-3 hours into taking over the streets of Sacramento downtown, right? We're bringing the pain to them. We're not going to stay in the community where Stephon Clark got killed because it's already oppressed enough.
No one cares, yeah.
I mean, people care, but at the end of the day,
the people that matter don't care.
The folks down here ain't going to worry about it. But when you make folks uncomfortable, the one thing I think we never thought about, but when I thought about it, when I knew when we were about to actually take over, I said, great, we're about to now take some monies away from people that matter. Mm-hmm. And now this thing that has kind of got some good push will probably make national news. But I myself didn't know how far we were going to be able to stretch it. I really, in my mindset, I said, okay, we're going to go up there. We're going to probably try to go do this. And then we're going to get into a big fight. You know what I'm saying? It's going to be a big brawl, or police are going to come with tear gas, and it's going to be a wrap. But literally, it's like we ran up, some soldiers ran up, kind of pushed things back. And I made a command with some other folks, yo, let's all lock arms. Mm-hmm. And we said, yo, I told some people to go around the corner, around the back, and we locked arm, went to the back, and we held court right there in front of Golden One. And we said chants. We let people know that this matters. And if it doesn't matter to you, it matters to us. And if it doesn't matter to you, you will now understand how much it matters to us.
So to provide like a different angle of this entire thing, earlier that day, you and I were actually introduced on social media.
Yes.
Which seems to be the way of the world here in 2018. And we're introduced by a mutual friend, and I had watched you do I don't remember if it was a Facebook Live or a radio interview or something. So I had heard you. I had become familiar with your sound and your delivery, and I'm like, okay,
all right.
And I knew I couldn't get to the game last night, or I knew I couldn't get to the game that night because, you know, I was wrapping up business with the radio show, and I knew what you guys were doing.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm not going to go down there because I'd be more inclined to pull the car over on the side of the freeway and join you rather than going to the game. So I just made the decision I'll watch this one from home. And I think it was about 6 o'clock I started to get like, "Are you here?" texts, and it's like no, I'm not there. What's going on? And then you get a shot of the live, arena.
Yeah.
It's like okay, now there's something happening. And it was sometime, right after the game started. That I got a call from Doug Christie, who was doing, the television broadcast. He said, "Hey, do you know anybody out there?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I know a couple of people that are out there." He was like, "Well, I've been in contact with some people in the Kings organization, and they want to meet with them." And my first thought was like, DC, what are you trying to get me to do here? He was like, no, like they want to talk with them and work with them. Like they're genuinely moved by this. They want to know what to do. Yeah. I said, okay. It was almost halftime. It was just before, halftime. So I said, okay, I'm going to make my way out there and I'll find someone.
And mind you, the people that were in. And mind you, the people that were out. Nobody was getting in. Right. That place was empty.
Right. So I make my way out there, and they had already made the decision. I don't know when you became aware of this or not, but they had already made the decision and had announced it on television. No one else is getting in, and they had announced it in the arena because they had told people. I think this was the game because there were two, and we'll get to the second one in a minute. But this was the game where it started maybe 15, 20 minutes late.
Yes, sir.
Because the NBA was trying to decide what to do. Yeah. And there are some good backstories about that we can touch on as well. But the NBA was trying to decide what to do. And eventually they said, start the game. Don't let anybody in. Don't let anybody else in. So I don't know that you know this, but they told everybody in the arena, hey, guys, come down.
Yes, what I heard.
Sit in the first, sit wherever. It's open seating. We're handing out food. Everything's on us tonight. Meanwhile, I'm outside. And I'm there, and I'm like, this is dispersed quite a bit. There's not a lot of people here. And then I make my way over to where most of the TV filming is done. I was like, okay, I'm hearing chants, and I was like, okay, there's still people here. And then I hear that booming voice on the microphone, and it's one of those moments where you're like, I know that, but I'm not sure who I'm looking for. And I look over, and you're over there. You're telling your team, you're telling the people that are out there, hey, you guys did a great job Be careful. All eyes are on us. Don't do anything stupid when you leave here. We got people's attention. We got people to notice. We're going to make them hear us. And I pulled you aside, and it was just kind of one of those moments where I don't know you, you don't know me, but we both know each other.
Yeah.
And you know, I was like, hey, I know this is a weird way to start our friendship, our partnership together, but there's some people from the Kings who want to talk.
And you at first you was like, you're Barry, right?
Yeah,
and I'm like, I'm thinking that you the FBI. I'm like, yeah.
And all that's running through my head is, man, Doug Christie put me in a hell of a spot right now to try to try to get this done here in this moment. But I'm getting calls from, the security at the Golden One Center, which is making me nervous because he's like, can you guys come in? Are you ready to come in? Because you have to come in through a certain entrance because we're not opening any doors out there. And it's like, okay, I'm going to get this guy who I don't know. I'm going to try to convince him to go with me. Yeah. And all of this is relying on Doug Christie. Yeah. So we go in, Doug meets us down in, some random part of the building. Security pulls us aside. And from there, members of the, hierarchy of the Sacramento Kings come over before eventually Vivek Ranadive comes over. You and I go and sit in the second row right behind Vlade and Peja and watch Vivek Ranadive give the most, meaningful, passionate speech I think any Sacramento Kings fan, other than "This is your team forever," has probably ever heard him give. Mm-hmm. I was sitting with you when he said that, when he did that, minute and a half, 2-minute speech. What was going through your mind and your heart in those moments?
First of all, what was going through my mind when we first met and you said they want to talk to you was I'm going to jail. All right. But because I have confidence and I respect the person that we are mutual friends with, I'm like, they're not going to set me up like that. Mm-hmm. So I trusted the process, right? Just like anything else in my life, I've trusted it. And the embrace that I got from Doug was like, oh, really? Mm-hmm. Like, I was like, okay, it was approval. And then as you and I talked and the owner came and said, we want to do something to fix this. Yeah. How can we help? And basically said, hey, this is what I want to say. Is that okay? Yeah. And then one of the most powerful moments is when we're sitting behind Vlade and Peja, and here goes Garrett. Mm-hmm. Yeah, shouts out to my brother Garrett Temple. Throws up his fist, like, right on, bro. Mm-hmm. And that right there let me know, okay. I know talking to some of the folks, there was some pushback a little bit. I know that down there, and we won't have to discuss that piece because we made them lose a lot of money, right? When you break it on down and we talk about protests and we talk about a way to make an impact and we talk about how do we get folks to really start realizing our problem is your problem, is once folks who just watch it on the TV like, oh, wow, that just happened, are now affected by that moment, as well as the people that are dealing with that moment on an everyday basis, when they're affected, now they're more reluctant to be like, oh, yeah, what can we do? Like, how can we be involved to make the change? Because now they know, oh, this is going to affect my business. And so in a power play, organically, us just doing that, but myself understanding when I saw you and you said come down, I knew at that play that we had something. And it was something bigger than me. It was something bigger than Stephon Clark at the situation, because people have to realize Stephon Clark is a smoke and racism and police brutality is a fire. So my idea was, how can I, in this moment of tragedy, start now getting some partnerships, some real equity with individuals that see that they utilize our black players to create a good living for their family, to lift up Sacramento as the Sacramento Kings do, and even go into the communities and do work. But we need more than just you coming in and setting up computers or doing a basketball court. We need some real equity. And with that, it just created a great synergy when we had the conversation with Garrett, V. Carter, and Doug. It created a great partnership where the ideas that we all sat and we talked for about an hour or so, that we were all on the same kind of page. And to me, that was impressive because I just always looked at it, some of these players, like they just don't get it, right? Because, there's some social activist movements going on in sports, but my whole thing has always been some of y'all Negroes just don't need to play games, right? That's how you show the boss that we are the boss and that our people matter. You just don't go.
Which, to play into that, I had mentioned there's two backstories. One, when the NBA was mulling over what to do, Vince Carter was pushing to have the game canceled.
I remember.
Vince Carter wanted the game canceled, which I didn't know until days later. But Vince had pushed to have the game canceled because he thought that would make the biggest impact.
Man.
He thought if SportsCenter, if Fox News, if CNN, if MSNBC led with the Sacramento Kings, and I can't even remember who it was that night. I don't remember who it was. Had to cancel the basketball game because of, and then the story gets told. Yeah. That's what Vince was pushing for. Another thing, you mentioned Garrett and Vince both, and being able to talk with them afterwards, and the, impassioned speech from Vivek Ranadive is they wanted Vince and Garrett to do it. They wanted Vince and Garrett to go out there and to talk to the very limited number of fans that were there. And it was Vince that said, nah. Garrett both. They were both like, no, like we're tired of being the black faces for all of the black issues. And they were like, well, who should do it? And they looked at, have Vivek do it. Yeah. It'll be more impactful coming from the owner of the team.
Because he's, at the end of the day, the guy that we have to deal with. I mean, let's be honest. Business is business.
He's the owner.
Yeah, V. Carter and Garrett, they may not be here next year, right? And of course, they're good brothers. Will always stay connected, but they may not be centered in this community. They'll be in another community having to deal with their community issues, right? But when you have an owner who fought, an immigrant as well, right? A person of color, right? Who this affects you too as well. Don't get it twisted, brother. You're a billionaire, but you still are a person of color. When you're speaking to volumes of, what we care and this shouldn't happen. And yes, I have a son as well, and I have family, and this is a moment that we need to figure out how we're going to change things. That speaks better volume. When we talk about boycotting and how V. Carter and Garrett, they were kind of pushing, let's not play. I've said it, and this going back into the Donald Sterling piece, right? The one unfortunate thing that we don't realize as black athletes, I feel, that they have a lot more power than they believe. Athletes will go on strike when, their money ain't right? The contract dispute, next thing you know, hey, guess what? We're going to go on strike. Got to come back to the table. We not playing. Well, they can do that. But when it comes to black lives being murdered, or when you have racist owners having a rant publicly basically saying that you guys are just some Negroes that are just working for me.
You're
and
my
I could
pieces.
care. You're my slave hands. When I looked at that the Warriors and Clippers playoffs, this is when Mark Jackson was still coaching, before the Warriors became the Warriors that they are now. I remember that moment, and I was like, woo. Like Donald Sterling said a lot, right? And I was like, yo, this is a moment where these guys, and I said it on some of my podcasts, I've said it on some of my YouTube, the moment where these guys could actually move a people by just doing one thing, saying, we're not playing. And they had every right, because you have an owner that you work with being racist. If you and I worked at Fire Wings, right? And we had an owner that was saying racist things, it would be to our right to say, I'm not working today. Like, there's no way you're going to have me work in this kind of environment. And I think those critical points where athletes don't utilize their power, when folks wouldn't have looked at them any different and said, I understand, would have created conversation of change, then we wouldn't have a Stephon Clark, because these athletes have a lot more power that they assume. And yes, I know folks have lives, but sitting down one game saying, we're not taking this racism. It doesn't matter if it is directed towards, but it's to our people. We are people of color. We are black men. We are black women. I think that right now you and I would have a different conversation, and Stephon Clark would be alive, because I think that what happens in America, we are not seen as equal. We are not seen as human, and they just kind of look at us as just a perishable item, right? You know what I'm saying? Just get away and throw it away as leisure.
And what people don't understand is the stick to sports crowd, the stick to singing, stick to acting, stick to whatever it is you do. What that is they forget to realize that the most prominent people, the most prominent black people in this country are athletes and singers and music. So that's why when you look back at, Tommy Smith and John Carlos, it was so impactful because the most impactful, athlete of the time, Muhammad Ali. He wasn't looked at the same back in the 60s and early 70s.
They hated him.
Right, but now that everyone is in consensus that he was on the right side of the Vietnam War, we look at him totally differently.
Colin Kaepernick.
Oh, it's going to be the same way.
Now, when you realize what he did, and then you turn around after 2 years, the counter was what? The owners put it in law, and that's what they do. And this war that we're going against with the police, this is a war. It's a war on black men and women, right? Black people are at war with the police, and it's not us shooting down the police at all. It's us actually being lynched.
It's a one-sided war.
It's a one-sided war. And if we even could call it a war, it's a war they have with us for whatever reason, but we know it's a bigger scale, and that's something else for a different topic. But when you see, right, Colin Kaepernick doing what he did, and then they turn around to put it in a letter of the law, that's how they keep their stance. Police have laws that protect them. Black people don't have laws that protect us. So when we're asking for folks to stand up and step up and to kind of attack the base that kind of keeps things running, right, it is a power play for us because all we have is what they need. When we shut down Golden One, we shut down business. And not only did we shut down business for Golden One, we shut down business for all surrounding areas. So they lost probably a couple $1 million. Can you imagine effectively us doing that throughout the whole season? There's going to be a whole lot of changing, right? But the fact that our athletes don't see that, wait, so you trying to tell me that if we pull back, right, we pull back and say, hey, enough is enough, that these folks aren't going to start to influential folks aren't going to start calling folks up and say, hey, man, we got a problem over here. We got to fix this. That it ain't going to be fixed. It's going to be fixed. Just like when they saw we have a problem with the Colin Kaepernick thing. Guess what? We're going to put it to law to now where it makes it illegal for these athletes to do something. They will now be penalized in a letter of the law. Before they didn't have a letter of the law for the whole not standing for the anthem. And we all know that it's not about the anthem, right? It's about police brutality. That's why Colin Kaepernick did what he did. So our idea of change and pushing it has to be more than just our athletes, have to be more than just our entertainers, have to be more than our public officials, have to be more than the people. It has to be all of us together. And that's kind of like the push that we have. I sat here yesterday with a group of my young men, right? And I let them know, listen, understand the numbers that you're dealing with. I asked them, how many NFL owners are in right now that are people of that are black, African American, that own an NFL team?
There's none.
How many?
The only minority owner is Shad Khan in Jacksonville.
How many NBA owners are black?
Is it one? Jordan?
So I asked him, take those numbers and then add those into how many African Americans on both sports control these two major sports that have major revenue. And it's like, yeah, the majority are black, but one ownership. That speaks volumes to how they try to control the mindset of say, hey, little Negro, just play athletics. We'll give you this money, but you can't say nothing when we do or things go as business as usual. And that becomes a bigger problem. And that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, and, it's worth noting that, you talked about what impact the NBA could have made during the Donald Sterling situation. And I think there's probably a handful of people in the world who truly know, probably less than 10. And I would venture LeBron's one of them. Adam Silver is one of them. Chris Paul is one of them. Carmelo Anthony might even be one of them. Knowing how close we were to shutting down the NBA playoffs. Because, we in the first episode of this Be Conscious podcast that we did, we talked with Howard Bryant, who wrote the book, The Heritage, and he does have a chapter in there where he talks about the Donald Sterling situation, and he quotes Carmelo Anthony on the record saying they should have shut the NBA playoffs down. That's how that should have transpired. Yeah. And I think Adam Silver knew that, and that's why Adam Silver took the swift action that he did to out Donald Sterling.
Yeah.
And I think the most fascinating case study would have been what if David Stern was still in charge, because David Stern had a totally different type of ruling than Adam Silver does.
Yeah.
Would David Stern have tried to shut the players down as soon as possible? Because David Stern, during his stay, he has much more of a Roger Goodell feel than
Most
an Adam
definitely.
Silver feel.
We remember the uniform policy, not the uniform.
The dress code.
Dress code.
The Allen Iverson rule.
Yeah, exactly. The Iverson rule.
Right. Yeah. So, it's fascinating to think what can be done together. And so that's a what if situation.
Yes, sir.
What happened at the Golden One Center that first night led to a game that you were in attendance for. It was the Kings and the Celtics, and in a move that I can't remember in any sport. The two teams sat down the day before the game and filmed a joint PSA with the theme being accountability.
We are one.
And you saw guys, you saw Al Horford, you saw Terry Rozier, you saw all those players that you saw make that deep run into the NBA playoffs saying Stephon Clark's name.
Yep.
And it was such a powerful sight, and you have that moment. And you're at that game. I remember you're at that game with your family, and you're with Garrett, and they got the accountability.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you've got the accountability shirts on. And a couple of days later comes the second protest at the Golden One Center, which is significantly different than the first one.
Yeah. Well, I think that you had the energy of the people. I mean, it was a city council meeting. Folks was upset still, rightfully so. And I think that folks are tired of symbolic moments, right? That was a great move. We love it. It continued to put this young man's name and his story on full display nationally, right? But at the same time, symbolic. It's like, okay, what are you really ready to do? And I had nothing to do with that that second piece, because I was actually in City Hall dealing with that. And then
which, by the way, was the night of Stephon Clark.
That whole thing, right? And then
in the mayor's office and the whole
everything was going. So it was so many different moving parts. But again, me understanding the bigger picture, I was called, got some info, and this time, met with the owner, and it was Mark Cuban, right? And I also this time brought in a heavyweight. A brother that I mentors me, Chet Hewitt,
Mr. Hewitt,
Sierra Health Foundation. Because I'm thinking bigger picture. I'm thinking, you know what? I sat down with the owner. I sat down with y'all. It was beautiful. We broke bread. We're like, okay, we're going to do the Kings and Queens thing. Because remember, we did the Kings and Queens piece. That was a powerful piece, right? It was a great bit of energy, healing for our young people. That was something I had in my mind.
It wasn't just healing for young people, because I was with Doug leading into that event. I was with Doug and Garrett after that event. And that event had just as big of an impact on the grown-ups that were there, whether it was media or the players, as well as the. Well,
I think I'm trying to figure out. Did we do it after the second? It
was after the second.
It was after. Okay. It was after. Yeah. So it was after the second one, but it was like folks were kind of like, well, what do we? I thought we had something in plan, and I like, well, I can't control what people do, but I think what happened with the second one, it actually opened up, like the fact that the Kings were very serious. To do the things that was necessary to make the change and the investment in the community. And that's why, again, I brought a heavy hitter, the language, because, when the big bulls start talking that language, I could have just sat there and said, hey, man, give me a couple thousand to help my program, some tickets, and, let's have a nice day let's do this for 3 years. It's great, have some King players come in. But I'm looking at equity in my community. I want to see Meadowview have the same opportunities as Delta Shore. Right? I want to be able to see the Kings not just layer their names on something and just move away. I want it to be significant. I don't want a symbolic moment. I want a moment that is a movement. So that's, I think, was the second play actually was orchestrated in a way to where it helped define, now that we're moving in a partnership with Build Black and the Kings, onto really creating equity moments, not just, okay, here's symbolic. We just shook some hands. We did this in an event with the kids, and everybody looks like they're so happy. No, something that when you go through our communities that are impoverished, our communities that are marginalized, you're going to feel that ownership, that King players, that management actually directly said, we want to change the dynamics of what's happening. And that right there, I think, is a bigger play than just a symbolic moment of let's just show up one time, and when the lights and cameras are gone, the work is not done. Yeah. No, when the lights, cameras are gone, the work is continued to be done. And
that's one of the frustrating things, about all of this is you mentioned, you get calls about what's going on that day. You're at City Hall trying to make a difference in terms of how this whole thing, is taken care of in the future, not just the present, but how this is taken care of moving forward. And just as you're getting calls, I'm getting calls like, man, I thought we were good. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, hey, I don't think this isn't us. I was like, I don't think this is us. Like, Barry's at City Hall. Like, I was texting with him earlier. Like, this, all angry black people aren't part of the same group. Like,
you're hitting me up. Hey, what's going on, B? Doug's getting nervous.
And I'm like, B, just tell me you're at City Hall, man. Just tell me that. And so, obviously, more good came about of that.
I'm for a bigger play, bro.
Right.
I'm for a bigger play. And I think that what I'm frustrated with now, and a lot of my community leadership, we've sat down, actually yesterday we talked about it, is that energy, people were ready to fight me at City Hall because I was like, hey, yo, let's wait. Let's get everybody in. Let's do it in a fashion that no one's getting hurt. They're looking at me like, what you working with them? Like, what, really? Mm-hmm. And I know I'm going to be here when the smoke clears. I'm going to be here when the moment has kind of died down, which I am, which a lot of my community leadership are. We just came back. I just came back from the Capitol fighting and saying we need to pass AP, what is that, 30, what is it, 30?
Bill 931.
9321, right? 931. And that's about more police accountability. So there's more work that has to happen. But what has happened is because it has kind of died down, folks aren't stepping up, and that's a bigger problem. We have to continue to put pressure on individuals to let them know that this Stephon Clark is not going to go away, and now this Brandon Smith that we just had is not going to go away until we have some accountability. And the part that I get frustrated is in that moment, everybody is hyped, but then it starts dying down. Folks are acting as if we still are not in that moment.
Yeah.
So it has to be a real movement. And those same heads that were trying to do a generic shutdown, though they shut it down, they're not as witty or they're not as polished or they're not as with it now because they're going back to work or they're going back to whatever they was doing. It was that great time. I need my people to continue to move the movement because it's not going to stop until people are being held accountable and folks get justice, until black people start being killed by people that we're paying to protect us, paying to protect our communities, having this quote-unquote relationship with. So that's kind of like my frustration when it comes down to it. And when you have something connected where we can start bringing some power players to the table to create some equity points, like if you're not at the table building onto that, sit back and watch and let us work. And that's my whole thing. It's like there has to be a bigger play than just protest. There have to even be a bigger play than just worrying about police. We have to get a bigger play in rebuilding our communities and start getting people to start creating businesses and start investing in places where folks will be like, why do I need to invest in here when I'd rather invest downtown where the equity is a lot better?
Mm-hmm. For Sacramento and Stephon Clark and now Brandon Smith, and we can go back a little further to Joseph May. What's next?
Well, after the election, it showed a lot.
Yeah.
It showed a lot that Sacramento isn't this, this liberal, this democratic, this diverse place.
Anne Marie Shumpert is a Republican who's winning.
She's no longer a Republican.
Oh, that changed.
Yes. There's a lot of twists, bro.
Come on.
The game is.
She renounced her republicanism.
Yes. And the folks who are listen to the game.
Okay.
The folks who were supporting her, endorsing her, city council members that were Democrats, they got denounced. They've been stripped.
I've seen that.
Right. So I've had people, because I have some folks in the council that I hold in high regards. And they reached out to me and they're like, because folks know that I was very sarcastic and how I promoted her to be ousted. You know, I'm very as militant as some folks may be. My humor is crazy. You be around me for a little bit, I have you weak, right? And what I was doing, because I have a very large volume of folks that follow me on Facebook, I was doing a lot of different pictures. I was calling her my baby mama, and I knew that
Hanging
got to
outside
her.
the office.
Oh yeah, barbecuing for her and everything, right? I was waiting for her to come out. Even had flowers for her, right? One of her friends, council person, said, "You know what? You need to talk to her. She's a good person. Blah, blah, blah. She probably doesn't really like you right now because you was calling her, you know, your baby mama, but you should sit down and talk with her." And the unfortunate thing about it is there are people in the black community that have relationships with her. And they have relationships with her that I think doesn't connect to what we need. So basically, for instance, if you were, you know, the DA, so to speak, I have a city program that, you know, helps young men coming out of incarceration, right? You can say, hey, well, Barry, I'll give you $10,000 to help with some funding to help resource your project, right? So automatically, you giving me money, that means I can't sit there and check you when you're wrong. I can't question you. And I think that's a lot of what our leadership does, the unfortunate part. So they're like, kind of like, wait a minute. Well, she's not, what do you mean she's not that bad? There's about 22 people of color that have died under her watch, and no one has been prosecuted. She hasn't lifted a finger and directly said, well, we need to go check into this police. Well, we need to probably fire her. Well, fire them. We probably need to prosecute.
And in
that
all
person.
likelihood, there's going to be another one or another two.
I mean, if you would think they would learn a lesson, but if I continue to take cookie out the cookie jar and my parent don't discipline me, what I'm going to keep on doing?
Taking cookies out the cookie jar.
Why not? So I think that's where folks don't really understand. I could easily have a conversation with her, and she can kind of give me her spill, and she can give me her ideas of what she's done, and tell me about how she's fought prostitution in Sacramento, even though Sacramento still is the hub of the prostitution capital, right? And how she's giving to this organization, and how she's trying to help a few black males here and there. But at the end of the day, I'm going to look at your track record on what are you doing against the police. How can you sit there and be holding them accountable when you're getting monies from them, when it's almost like they're supporting you to make sure you don't take any of our guys, don't even question our guys, don't even charge our guys. And what she did was so strategic. She laid down the letter of the law. And as frustrating as we want to be, folks have to understand what keeps these police here and what keeps them continuing to get away with what we look at as murder is law. Rules that protect them, the Police Bill of Rights. So when she came out there and had her press conference after a month of hiding, right, she was like, you know what, election time, I better say something because I'm getting a lot of pressure. She laid down the letter of the law. And at that particular point, right then and there, I knew those police officers are not getting prosecuted. Those police officers are going to walk. She is going to be reelected because all she did was squarely lay down the letter of the law. And the things that she said, I remember highlighting it, saying that probable cause and basically, you know, was there a crime committed? You know what I'm saying? And these things are actual, when you look at the law of it, it's like, well, she got to point. Now, humanity is saying, well, those police shouldn't have did that. But when you look at it, letter of the law, well, there's a point, right? And then the miraculous boost in her career, not only in the election for her to really seal the win, if there was any chance for the other person to kind of come and maybe steal it away from her, from the volume of what we were pushing, you have the Golden State Rapists.
Oh, yeah.
That was so, yeah. I mean, if that wasn't a chess move,
crime
bro,
heads were going nuts.
Oh, listen, if that wasn't a chess move, it was like, yo, no more immunity for that old guy. Bring him out.
That's some stuff you see in a movie.
And it's so folks from like us were like, wow, well played. Because that came out of the middle of nowhere. Because think about it, she was avoiding the black community. We were on her behind. Right? There was really a notion that, wow, this guy Noah Phillips, who was, I'm not going to, talk negatively about the guy, but I wasn't moved by him at all. But he may be able to pull this miraculous victory because of the pressure that we were putting on her to show this DA in a negative light, right? Yeah. To really challenge her. Here comes that component that no one ever saw coming, and that rapist, I got this. Here's that win for her. And that kind of changed the dynamics, as well as I think the energy of the people of continuing to push and continuing to really push on those polls, regardless of, I know some folks believe that some of the polling could have probably been rigged. Who never knows? I mean, there was a lot of things that were new this year coming around. I don't think really pushed as hard with the black community, enough of the black community, and I was trying to help him with that as he should have, and I don't think he really had his principles. Again, he was speaking to the emotion of us and not really understanding that we've heard emotion, we've heard hope and change. We've got that. We want to know if you're really going to do something.
Don't
right?
play us.
Because it's like, I don't know.
Right.
And it's that win line of, here, guys, that resonated to the Johnny public that cares about those things.
Yep.
You got a rapist, and here's the catch on the rapist. Guess what? He's a police officer.
Yeah.
So you can't sit there and tell me I'm not going to hold police accountable.
Now I'm 1 for 23. Man.
I mean, you know what I'm saying, King? These are the things that when you look at this war that we're in, that we're involved with, this chess game that we're in. While some folks are playing checkers, people are playing real chess. They got real chess moves, got real chess players. And then at the same time, I believe she's LGBTQ woman, right? I believe that she is. That is basically now saying, I'm in fear of my life. Yeah. So I'm not showing up to the black community because I fear that someone's going to hurt me. Like you play that sympathy card, right? But then you still become a champion.
Which her voters can relate to, though.
Exactly. So you're resonating to the people that matter to you. The game is deep, dog.
I feel like we just saw someone win a presidency on the backs of the
That's
same
how it felt,
exact thing.
That's how it really felt.
Berry Accius, I can't recommend finding him on Facebook enough. It's BerryAccius.
Yes,
go check him out. Voice of the Youth. You do tremendous work.
And Twitter the same thing.
Instagram, all of the social media stuff, man. You're a whiz at that, and you'll learn quite a bit. I know how busy you are, man. Thanks for joining us, especially for as long as you did.
Brother,
today.
This was beautiful. I got to sit down with my brother, break bread. Congratulations on your new endeavor. I'm happy that I'm one of the guys to help launch that with you. You know what I'm saying? It's just a great experience. And I just believe that, man, we just need real folks, real people that do the real work to be highlighted. And I thank you for this platform, and continue to rise the voices, man, because I think folks need to start realizing how much power they have and how we have to move in a way, the way they move, to create law. Just want to say one thing before I leave. Black Lives Matter really kind of emerged in 2014, 2015 with the Mike Brown thing, Ferguson. Blue Lives Matter emerged in 2016. Blue Lives Matter, this police coalition, has now got a law and a bill that I believe is going to pass, or it's like right there on the cups.
It's passed in some states already.
It's already passed in a few states. That's basically protecting the police even more. So again, the letter of the law, it works against us and it works for them.
I appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to check out The Lowdown every Monday through Friday on Sports 1140 AM in Northern California on the KHDK app. If you search The Lowdown here in the same podcast platform you're listening to this one, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Hit the 5-star review. If you'd be so kind, refer to friends, share it on social media. If you have any feedback, good or bad, you can reach me at dbarling at saclocalmedia.com. Again, that's dbarling at saclocalmedia.com. There is an unbroken line of police violence in the United States that takes us all the way back to the days of slavery, the aftermath of slavery, the development of the Ku Klux Klan. There's so much history of this racist violence that simply to bring one person to justice is not going to disturb the whole racist edifice. That's Angela Davis. I'm Damien Barling. We'll see you next Thursday.